Well, good morning, y'all. We are in the middle of this series, How Little Can We Do and Still Get Into Heaven? And last week we talked about how little we could do and still be saved by grace. And today we're going to explore the idea of how little can we do to help other people and still get into heaven. Believe it or not, it sounds like a funny question, but Jesus actually addresses this issue head on in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10. There's this religious scholar, this Jewish scholar, who comes up to Jesus, and it appears he's trying to trap Jesus in some way, to trip him up. And so this guy comes up to him, and he says, "Teacher, what must I do to get into heaven?" Jesus answered his question with a question. He says, well, what's written in the Hebrew Bible? So if you're a scholar, you know, how does it answer your question? And the scholar said, well, you should love the Lord your God with everything you have, all your heart, your soul, your strength, your mind, everything. And love your neighbor as yourself. Perfect, Jesus says. Your answer is correct. Follow these commands and you will receive eternal life. The scholar was frustrated by his response because he was hoping to make himself appear smarter than Jesus. And so then the scholar says, but who is my neighbor? You know, when I read this passage, it appears that Luke, who is the author of this gospel, kind of disses this guy for asking Jesus this question, primarily because it sounds like he was trying to be a bit of a jerk to Jesus. But really, I do think it's a valid question, isn't it? Who is my neighbor? I mean, when I walk past yet another homeless person lying in the middle of the street, and I think, you know what? He is not my problem. Or is he? Is he my neighbor? And when you see the news footage of the devastation in the Bahamas and all these people left homeless, and you go, wow, that's really terrible, but that's over there and that's not my problem. Or is it? Are they my neighbor? And when we see the image of impoverished people from Central America standing there at the border trying desperately to have a better life, do we think, hey, don't let those people in. Those people are not our problem. That's not my problem. Or is it possible that they are my neighbor? Seriously. Who the heck is my neighbor? So have you given it some thought? Who is your neighbor? Is it really my problem that those people down the road are losing their home? Maybe they were irresponsible with their finances or the budget, and is that really my problem? Are they really my neighbor? It's tragic that they have cancer and they're really in bad shape and sick, and I feel really bad, but what am I supposed to do about that? Are they my neighbor? Well, when this question comes up and that Hebrew scholar asks Jesus, well, who is my neighbor? Jesus launches into telling the story of the Good Samaritan as a way to make his point as to who he would define as being his neighbor. And so I'm going to give you the 30-second version of this story, which is basically that the Jews, this Hebrew scholar was a Jew, the Jews and the Samaritans were pretty much enemies of each other. They hated each other. And this Jewish guy, as Jesus says, is traveling down the road. As he's traveling down this road, he gets beat up, he gets robbed, and left for dead on the side of the road. And a priest walks by, and you think, this priest is going to help this guy, but the priest says, that's not my problem. And he keeps walking right on by. And then this Jewish teacher walks by. And you think, this Jewish brother, he's going to help out his brother, but this guy goes, you know what, it's not my problem, and he walks right on by. But this Samaritan guy comes by, and as my good friend Tim Sutherland would say, he gets down off his donkey, and he goes and he helps this guy. And the irony of the story, of course, is that the one guy who helps is the enemy of this guy. He's a Samaritan. Samaritans and Jews, again, hate each other. And so these people who don't like each other, he's the one who ends up helping. And he doesn't just kind of help him. He goes above and beyond and really helps this guy get back on his feet. And then Jesus looks right at this Hebrew scholar and he goes, now, that's your definition of who your neighbor is. Go and be like that. So if I'm interpreting what Jesus is saying here correctly, then people I don't care for, people who may annoy me, people who I just don't like, those people are my neighbors. It seems pretty consistent with what Jesus says elsewhere in the Bible, because in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 5, Jesus says this. He says, you heard it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of God. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors, the common criminals, they're doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing any more than anybody else? Do not even the pagans do that? So Jesus continues to lay this love your neighbor thing pretty heavy on us and says, so you love the people in your life, you love your family and your friends. That's awesome. You're an awesome person. So what? Like even the common criminals do that. How is it that you're any different from anybody else in the world who doesn't follow Jesus? And so if Jesus is calling us to live differently and truly love everybody, how are we any different than a common criminal just because we love our family and friends? What's the point? A lot of us, when we're asked, what is our mission in life? A lot of us will answer, we'll say, our families are the most important thing to me. That's everything to me. We want to invest our time and our energy in our families. Jesus says, that's great. But that's really just a given. Jesus is calling us to something more and invest in those people who we're not related to, those we don't even know, and worse yet, those people who we may not even like. If all we're doing is raising our families so that they can grow up and raise a great family, so that they can grow up and raise a great family, what are we doing to break the cycle of self-indulgence and really contribute to something more in this world that Jesus calls us to? How are we distinguishing ourselves as a follower of Jesus? I have to tell you, this question of who is my neighbor really hit me deeply over the last couple weeks in a very real way. I have personally faced this issue in my business life. For those of you who don't know, and for those of you who do know, you're sick of me saying this, but for those of you who don't know, I am just a volunteer here. And my paying job is that I'm a real estate developer. And I am typically developing uber expensive, luxury, residential, high-rises, typically in urban areas, mostly in Chicago and Houston. And I really enjoy developing in those kind of next transitional areas where you can have a huge impact on those neighborhoods. And that typically means that those neighborhoods are a mixed bag, if you will. And I have this site I've been working on developing that is across the street from this beautiful park. I think we have a Google image here, yeah. So I have this site over here on the right tied up under contract. It's 51,000 square feet, and it just looks onto this beautiful park. It's a beautiful site, isn't it? Would you love to live there looking onto this park? And the problem is that what I've circled over here to the left, that is a huge development of public and low-income housing. And they use this park all the time. And I'm just going to be brutally honest with you this morning and tell you the cold, hard truth. And that is that my first reaction was, hey, this really may devalue my development. Will I be able to get people to live here and feel secure? And if they do, will I really be able to get them to pay the rents that I need to make this project profitable? I'm not proud of it. That was in my head. And then I started looking at it, and I go, are they my neighbor? And then, to add insult to injury, the city of Chicago now forces developers to provide affordable housing as part of our developments. And my particular alderman forces me into providing affordable housing on site. And I'm like, what the heck? Why are you making those people my problem? Why should I provide housing for those who can't afford to live in my development? Why is that my problem? It's dragging down my returns for me and my investors. It's costing us millions of dollars. And the entire project was about ready to tank, and I was feeling very, very indignant about the whole thing, going, how is this my problem? But then I thought to myself, are they my neighbor? Because the truth is, if this situation happened in Nicaragua, I would have killed for the opportunity to provide affordable housing like this for people in need. The truth is that if I were looking for a project for Westridge to get involved in, this little neighborhood over here to the left, that little neighborhood around the corner for my project is the perfect project for us as a church to dive into. And I would have stood up here on stage and I would say, hey, this is worth your investment. Get involved. Where's your money, your time? This is worth our investment. These people are our neighbor. Let's do something. But to be clear, because it was costing me something of great value, because it now affected the business side of my life, I was out. I have to tell you that my hypocrisy was absolutely fully exposed. And I had become fully convicted. And so I've gone about creating change in this location, and so I've been restructuring the project now, doing the hard work of restructuring the project so that we can provide affordable housing on site in this development. I met with the park district across the street. I found out more about their programming, and we are now setting up a scholarship for kids who are in need from the neighborhood who can't afford to pay the fees to participate in things like basketball and chess club and just to swim at the pool. They can't afford it, so we can set up a scholarship program for those in need. And now I have this crazy idea. What if we could treat a residential community like a church and somehow take on this neighborhood as part of an ongoing project? What if we could connect the people of resource with the people in need? What kind of ongoing impact would that have on this community where these two groups of people begin to merge and make a difference in their lives? The project is a long way from being done, and it may fall flat, but I have been convicted that people that I wouldn't think about in my business life, they're my neighbors too. Just because it's not in my church, just because it's not in Nicaragua, doesn't mean that that doesn't make them my neighbor. And now I have to figure out how I'm going to make a difference in their lives. I really desire authenticity in my life. And I really want to be the same person when I'm up here talking on a Sunday morning as I am in the boardroom of my office on Mondays, as I am in Nicaragua. But sometimes we can develop a blind spot. And man, it is really easy to become calloused in this world and not give a damn about anything other than me and mine and my little world. And I think a lot of us face it, whether we are police officers or we are contractors or we're insurance salesmen or whatever, we all encounter people in our professional lives that somehow we treat differently than we would if it was part of our church experience. People who we encounter every day, our neighbor that Jesus puts into our lives. The challenge for me has always been that I really firmly believe in this idea of empowerment versus enablement. In other words, I want to give somebody a hand up, not a hand out. I want to make sure we don't enable somebody to stay in this, that victim position to the point that they are never empowered to get up on their own 2 feet and take responsibility and rise above their circumstances and own the life that God has for them. I mean, when you think about it, what is the number one thing that we all say to ourselves to justify why we didn't give money to that guy standing there in the middle of the street asking for money? What do we say? What do we say? They're just going to blow it, right? Alcohol, drugs, they're just going to blow it. And so now I'm justified, keep my money in my pocket, and I don't get involved because I've figured it out. They're just going to blow the money. The problem with that is that sometimes we become so immobilized by the fear of enabling somebody or being taken advantage of that we do nothing, which is also the wrong thing to do. I think the best definition that I've heard that really can help to drive us in terms of all-encompassing thinking is the definition I've heard of compassion, which is quite simple. Compassion is practicing the art of unselfish living in everything we do, in all aspects of our lives. Because Jesus never taught the art of getting ahead. You will never read in the Bible the art of looking out for yourself. Instead, Jesus taught us and showed us, more importantly, the art of unselfish living. And that it's better to do something and be wrong. It's better to do something and be taken advantage of than to do nothing at all. So, how little can I do for other people and still get into heaven? I guess I'll defer to Jesus on this one. He addresses this head on in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 25, as he paints the picture of what Judgment Day is going to look like. And I've added the words, when Jesus comes back, but when the Son of Man comes back and all the angels with him, he will sit in his glorious throne. And all the nations will be gathered before him. And he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he'll put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. And you know what I say when I read this verse, right? You don't want to be no goat. And then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me.' And then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? And when did we see you a stranger and invite you in? We would have totally invited you in. When did we see you needing clothes and clothing? When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you?' And then the king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you've done even for the least of these, you've done it unto me.'" There is no passage in the Bible that haunts me like this passage. This is one of the only places in the Bible that gives us a glimpse into what Judgment Day is going to be like. And it paints a very clear picture that on that day, we will be held accountable for the life that we've lived and what we have done, even for the least of these. We will be held accountable for figuring out who the heck our neighbor is. And apparently, for a whole lot of people who would have been considered by Jesus to be our neighbors, we have simply, without even knowing it, turned our backs on these people. Because our neighbor, as it turns out, is Jesus, as represented by everyone in our life that we come across who are in need. Whatever you have done, even unto the least of these, you've done it unto me. This passage forces us to ask really tough questions. Am I doing enough? Am I doing anything at all? Am I doing the work that it takes to figure it out? Am I turning my back on those who are thirsty, those who are hungry, those who are lonely? Am I doing the work to figure out who is my neighbor? Who are the least of these? Who are these people, and how can little old me, just one person, how can I make a difference that'll make any difference at all? I think a lot of people look to the church to solve this for us, and the problem is the church can't do it for any of us, can't do it for you. And this is something I think that each one of us has to really wrestle with and figure out for ourselves. But as a church, we can help to facilitate this in your life and set up a lot of opportunities to be able to serve the least of these. And so while we have a lot of opportunities here at Westridge to serve locally through the things like the Compassion Team and our partnership with Huff Elementary, I want to take the last few minutes that we have this morning and focus in on the ministry that we have in Nicaragua, because we tend to think about that those people over there, they are not my problem. And the people in Nicaragua, they have become part of our neighborhood. And the ministry that we do down there is called Nika Angels. And we chose Nicaragua because it is one of the most impoverished countries in the Northern Hemisphere. Most of the kids will not make it past the 6th grade. And so part of our mission is to just take this group of people and to help them to become empowered and respected and to inspire them to keep going. Just take a look at this video. We're here in El Transito with a group of volunteers who are busy painting and rehabbing the wall and rehabbing the facility here at El Transito School. Nika Angels always starts with the schools because the school is the center of the community, and that's where we want to begin because it brings everybody together in a unified way. From starting at the school, we build relationships with parents and kids, and from that we find out other needs that they may have. Where the last school we were at San Paulo, we found out there was a whole group of people that didn't have access to clean water. And so we went out and dug a well for them to have clean water.
What is the biggest change that you've seen in the people or the community's lives here?
Well, the biggest, I will say, education. We have been able to help out with, having a better school, bringing clean water. I would say creating opportunities. It's like a big, big thing for us.
They've become family, and they've become family with our family. Our kids are friends with kids here and the adults here, and they remember them, they remember their names and their likes, and we walk up and it's just like we saw them yesterday.
With Nika Angels, really, it's all about empowering and not enabling. It's about giving a hand up, not a hand out. So one of the main areas of focus for Nika Angels is education. These kids are ignored. The schoolrooms are just blistering hot, and we try to put in ceiling fans. We put in new roofs that reflect the sunlight and help to make it a cooler environment. And so when we come in and we rehab a school, all of a sudden we give these kids hope and we give them a hand up.
The hope for a lot of the kids here, having opportunities of having a good school, maybe creating a new business, that help them to have goals and things that they want to achieve for their lives.
One of the missions of Nika Angels is to create sustainable economic development. And so even though Stu's a founder of Nika Angels, he's also an entrepreneur. And by investing in him to open up a business, in turn, he is creating jobs for local young men here in the community. We don't have to continue to pump money into it, and it sustains itself because they create a business that is sustainable. Nika Angels is a grassroots organization that empowers the people of the community to have a greater quality of life through education, clean water, and sustainable economic development. So our goal is not to change the country of Nicaragua. It's to just make small, incremental changes in the lives of the people in the community that we are around all the time. Our neighbors, the people that we face. We're gonna have a big event here November 9th called Wine to Water, where we turn this whole auditorium into a big wine tasting room, and that's a big fundraiser we have for Nicaragua where you can get involved financially. 100% of the proceeds, the ticket, everything goes to help Nika Angels. But one of the greatest opportunities I think that we provide is that we create these work trips where you can go and personally get involved. And so we're taking a sign up today for anybody who is interested in going. You can sign up. That's not a commitment to go. It's just a sign up to get more information to show us that you're interested. And so you can either sign up in the lobby, or you can do the text thing and text your name, and then we're going to have a meeting sometime and just to do some more, give you some more information to see if that's something you want to do. But here's the one thing I can say is that when we get into a situation like that, when you put yourself into a different culture, into a different region where the need is so great all around you, it completely changes your perspective about who your neighbor is and what it is that we can do. And we're just constantly having to make decisions because you're in this situation where there's so many people who are impoverished and so many people in need of where do you start and where do you stop and how do you do it. And those are those are difficult to navigate all the time. So, all we can do as a church is to provide opportunities for you, and there's a lot of opportunities where you can serve the least of these. Like I said, you can do it locally if that's not something that interests you internationally, but you have to take the steps to make a difference, to do it yourself and to figure it out. But you can make a difference. And, I think it's really important to point out when Jesus is talking in Matthew 25, he doesn't say, hey, why aren't you ending world hunger, right? He isn't saying, hey, why aren't you out there changing the world? Why aren't you out there stopping poverty? Why aren't you out there stopping injustice? What he does say is, hey, there was that person that was right there in front of you. Why didn't you respond? There was a person right there who needed a drink. They were thirsty, and you didn't give them water. There was a person right there. You had an opportunity to make a difference in that person's life, and you turned your back. It's not about changing the world. It's about doing the small part that we play in just making a difference in the lives of one person or two people or three. Making a difference in the lives of the least of these. So that on that day, we will not have to ask, Lord, when did I ever see you in the street? Not feed you. Of course I would have fed you. When did I ever see you thirsty? Of course I would have given you a drink. I would have never turned my back on you, Jesus. On that day, I don't want to say that I said, those people are not my problem. That's not my issue. Those people are over there, they need to deal with that themselves. But rather, I want to be driven by the mantra so that on that day, when I stand before Jesus, I can say whatever I did even unto the least of these neighbors of mine. And because of that, I did it to Jesus.